Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com, starting off our second year of YouTube videos with a talk that one of you requested, and I was kind of shocked that you needed to, because I thought I'd done something about this. The person in question is Scriabin. For some reason, Scriabin kind of slid under the doorway here, or I never got around to him. And it's kind of funny because I enjoy a lot of his music. But I think it just goes to show that he's kind of a world apart. He lives in his own little bubble. I mean, you know why. I mean, basically he was crazy. I mean, he's kind of like, Chopin on crack. I mean, he's a piano composer. And he died when he was only 45. He was one of two composers who died from septicemia arising most likely from an insect bite. Do you know who the other one was? That's right, Alban Berg. Actually, they sort of were both heavily into this sort of decadent fin de siècle, late romantic ethos, although of course Berg came later. So maybe that had something to do with it. Maybe composers like that were more subject to septicemia from insect bites than other composers. I don't know. Anyway, Scriabin was very famous in his day. He was, of course, just as famous for being the well-known adherent of the sort of quasi-cult religion thing called Theosophy. Now, do you know what Theosophy was? Well, I'm going to tell you, because it really matters in terms of understanding what Stravinsky, the other guy, Scriabin, was. Theosophy was a quasi-cult founded in 1875 in New York City by Helena Blavatsky. And quite frankly, the fact that it was founded in 1875 by Helena Blavatsky is probably all that you would ever need to know to evaluate just how sensible the whole concept is. Actually, it's a kind of amalgam of Eastern and Western religion with a quasi-monotheistic creative force and a Zen Buddha-like belief in karma and reincarnation. And like most of these theories, there was this belief that there was this secret society of superior beings. In this case, they lived in Tibet. Why not? I mean, they always live in Tibet, and somehow they were going to come back and do something somewhere and, achieve the perfection of all mankind. It was a very pacifist philosophy, and, it believed in the perfectibility of man into higher beings and higher spiritual realms, and, it just was terrific. I'm sorry I missed it, and I'm sure you are too, but they're still around. I mean, there is a Theosophical Society, and you can look them up if you're really that interested. Actually, from a purely philosophical point of view, there were a lot of weird theories in the twilight of the Tsarist era in Russia, and particularly involving secret societies and strange conspiracy theories. Theosophy was really the more benign side of that trend. The more malignant side was, of course, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which was the racist, horrifying example of really quite a similar idea. The idea that there are these like shadowy beings who are running around controlling everything, and it's all just, Anyway, Scriabin believed that. He believed it quite seriously, and a lot of his music, his late music particularly, is based on this idea of spiritual transcendence, particularly the last work that he never completed, his Mysterium, which was apparently going to be performed somewhere in the Himalayas and create an apocalypse which was going to cause the rebirth of mankind, or I don't know, something like that. All right. In the meantime, he sounds like Chopin on crack. And that's what we need to know, at least his earlier stuff. And as he aged, he actually went through a remarkable metamorphosis stylistically, practically to the point of atonality. And it all happened really in just a couple of decades because he died so young. And so it's really, he had a fascinating life. And his music is like that, basically. It follows this remarkable trajectory from proto-Chopin to total modernism, a wholly personal, unique modernism based on mystical chords and crazy harmonies, and it's just wonderful. But I haven't talked about it, and I guess I didn't talk about it because it's kind of weird. and it deserves its own topic. And so I'm going to give you a rundown on some really good and really bad Scriabin albums. This is not an ideal list by in any sense, and I'm mixing piano and orchestral works really because it's a unified body of work. And so it really needs to be considered as such. And hopefully going on, I'll be able to talk about individual works that I think are particularly impressive and fun to talk about. And I'll mention some of them along the way, but we'll revisit some of them. I want to just get something out there. So you can't say to me, you didn't do Scriabin. I already feel guilty enough. There is no guilt in Theosophy, by the way, which is a good thing. So I don't have to feel guilty. Let's start with the sonatas. There are 10 of them. They are wonderful, and they run the entire gamut of his musical styles, from his early, romantic style to his late, very, very modernist style. And you can basically get everything you need to know in Scriabin just by getting the 10 sonatas, which fit conveniently on 2 discs, because most of them are only about 10 minutes long. The later ones are single movement works that tend to be quite brief. So it's wonderful to be able to get them all in a batch. And there are a bunch of really good Scriabin sonata cycles. There's Anna Malikova, which Jed reviewed on Classics Today, which may be hard to find. It's easier on, ordering it from overseas. It's on an odd label. I'm not going to go into it, but she's excellent. That's Anna Malikova. Remember that name? She's very, very good. Vladimir Ashkenazy, can't go wrong. I've got his cycle sitting in a big box behind me somewhere here. And then there are 2 that I really recommend that I have here just to show you. One, of course, is Marc-André Hamelin on Hyperion. This is a fabulous, absolutely fantastic Scriabin sonata cycle. It's probably my reference version. I love it, just love it. So Hamelin is one way to go, but also worth considering, especially if you want to go further along the line and listen to his other piano works, some of which are absolutely magnificent, and his short piano pieces, which are a lot of fun, is this thing on Capriccio with Maria Lettberg. Now, Maria Lettberg is a Swedish pianist who actually she did her doctoral dissertation on Scriabin. She is a Scriabin specialist. She knows everything there is to know about Scriabin. She's also, more importantly, a superb pianist and a marvelous Scriabin pianist. And this box on Capriccio, gives you the complete piano works on 8 CDs. I mean, it's just fantastic. It's clearly easily the best complete set out there. And you also get a DVD where she has an interview, and they do a thing called Mysterium with Scriabin, who had synesthesia and related keys to colors, and it's a color Scriabin thing. You can watch it if you want. I'm not into it. But I'm going to play you a little bit of my favorite Scriabin sonata, which is number 5, probably because it's exactly in the middle between his early style and his really late aphoristic style. There's something very, very cool about this piece, not the least of which is that it's extremely satisfying despite the open-ended ending and the fact that there's no reason for it to have anything like the shape it does. It just works. And here's a bit of it with Maria Lettberg performing. It's really, really good. Lovely, lovely music, and interesting and different. It's a bit like Proto-Ravel, maybe, or maybe Messiaen without the birds, or something like that. It's very, very interesting. And this is a terrific box. It really is. And like I said, it's on Capriccio, and it's cheap. I mean, you get the whole thing. I think it's less than $30 on Amazon. It's a steal. So give it some serious thought. So that is definitely worth talking about. And with that, we have dealt essentially with piano music for our purposes in this talk. Now let's talk about orchestral pieces. They're actually pretty straightforward. There's an early symphonic poem. There's the piano concerto, which is the best piano concerto that Chopin never wrote. There is the symphonies. There are the symphonies. There are 5 of them. And 3 of them have, our basic orchestral symphonies. But then we get to the poem of ecstasy, which sounds so much better in French. It's Le Poème d'Extase. I love d'extase. It's just great. And then there's Prometheus, the poem of feu, of fire, which is Symphony number 5. The poem of ecstasy, of course, is the popular Scriabin piece. It's the one by which his reputation as an orchestral composer has been sustained. And the best ones, well, the ones I like the most, I mean, it's just easy. Not in complete sets of symphonies, which we'll talk about in a minute. Stokowski, he played this every 15 minutes. He hauled out and did the poem of ecstasy. It really has lost a lot of its popularity. You don't see it performed as much as you used to. And I think that's a terrible pity because it's so much fun when it's done, really well, which means like over the top and really going for it. And the other 2, the singleton performances that I just love. One is the young Claudio Abbado with the Boston Symphony. The Boston Symphony being the world's greatest French orchestra. And it sounds very French in this performance. It's just splendid. Gloriously played, wonderfully recorded. And my all-time favorite, and this may surprise you, Lauren Mazel with the Cleveland Orchestra. It's really, really good. And it has all that Cleveland-y sort of precision. And it has rhythm, which you usually don't expect in a big, slushy, late romantic behemoth like this thing. It ends supposedly with like the loudest chord in all of orchestral music. It's like quadruple forte with organ and huge orchestra all behind it. But this is a wonderful performance. And you also get Prometheus and the piano concerto with Ashkenazi. And Ashkenazi's is my version of choice in the piano concerto too. So there's nothing not to love here in this Decca recording by Mazel in Cleveland. If you are a poem d'extase fan, then I strongly suggest you consider that. And there is a terrible, horrible, awful performance of the poem of ecstasy. There are actually quite a few really bad ones because it can just fall apart and be so droopy and drippy, and it can be quite disgusting. Well, extremely disgusting is Valery Gergiev with the Kirov Orchestra. My God, it's horrible. It's vulgar. It's sludgy. It's badly recorded. The orchestra is totally insensitive. You don't get any sense that these people give a damn about the music at all. And oh my God, the principal trumpet, he is beyond wretched. I'm going to play you a sample of it. It really is something you've just got to hear. Listen to the solo trumpet doing this thing. Just listen to it. Okay, I was kidding. I don't have permission to play samples of that recording because it was on Philips. That was me doing the trumpet solo on my trusty kazoo about as well as you'll hear it on that recording. So I think it gives you the right impression. I really do. And with that, we conclude this chat about the poem d'extase. Now let's talk about symphony sets, which include the poem d'extase. The one that you really should hear historically, even though it sounds like hell, is this one. Nikolai Golovanov. Golovanov was, I don't know, he was a nut job on the podium. He was a lot saner as an operatic conductor because he had people who he had to accompany. As an orchestral conductor, he was a wild man. He really was. And these Scriabin performances are kind of legendary. They were recorded between like the late 1940s and 1952. In horrible Soviet era, congested, dynamically limited mono sound with an orchestra that was literally screaming its guts out for most of the time, and a conductor who was pulling no punches. It's an ordeal, let's put it that way. But one worth hearing for his handling of tempo, and I wouldn't even call it rubato because it's more like apocalyptic rubato. I don't know what you'd call it. It's a tornado. I mean, it's fast, it's slow, it's all over the place. It's fascinating. And this is on Archipel, but there are Golovanov boxes and things, and they have a lot of his Scriabin in it. You can find these things around. I particularly like the third symphony here, which is called the Godly Poem. I mean, most people call it the Divine Poem because it's French, the Poème divin, whatever it is, the Divin Poème, however they do it. But and it's the Symphony Orchestra of the All Union Radio, recorded in 1946. And my God, if that isn't a screeching Ralph, I don't know what is. But you also get the piano concerto with Heinrich Neuhaus, who was legendary, absolutely legendary pianist. So this is kind of fun to have. They call this the Desert Island Collection, possibly because after you hear it, you will want to retreat to a desert island for the rest of your life where you can live in peace and quietude. But really, Golovanov is special, and I have to mention it. You just cannot talk about Scriabin symphony cycles without. Now, two to avoid. There was an old Eliyahu Inbal cycle on Philips with Frankfurt Radio, which was very kind of soft-edged and uninteresting, but it was for a long time just about the only thing you could get in the West. And there's also a Kitaenko cycle on RCA, which is not good, especially the poem D'Extase, which has like a female choir at the end doing post-coital sighing. I mean, it's just the acme of pointless vulgarity, because the music is vulgar enough. You don't need to add anything. It leaves nothing to the imagination. And so I don't deal with that either. But there are three extremely good Scriabin symphony cycles. There is Ashkenazi on Decca, which is first rate with the Deutsche Symphony Orchestra Berlin, and you also get the piano concerto with Peter Jablonski, I think is on here, isn't it? Yes, it is, and it's really, really fine. It's lean and exciting, and strikingly, you would think for like it's Russian, it's Ashkenazi, but it's strikingly unsentimental and muscular. Very, very good. Very good performances. Also worth having if you want the Russian school of Golovanov, only more so. Well, not really more so, just louder. Svetlanov. Svetlanov's late Svetlanov Canyon Classics. This is from Japan. You may be able to find it reissued as part of that Svetlanov series. I don't know. I don't have these in that series. So I don't know. Maybe one of you will tell me if it's the same performances. I have these from Japan, and boy, are they loud. Holy crap, they are loud. They will peel the paint off your back wall. Just blow your neighbors out of the room. It's really, really exciting. So Svetlanov is worth considering. And finally, the best, the however per recording for Scriabin symphonies, which I would have been talking about anyway, because there's a big box coming out soon, is Muti. Muti in Philly. Boy, is this great. It is that combination of discipline and the Philadelphia sound, that big, rich, dark, sensual, oozing sex appeal kind of sound. Absolutely fabulous. This is probably the best thing that Muti did in Philadelphia as a set. These performances are extraordinary, and they've really been the reference edition since they first came out, and they will be in the big Muti box that should be here at some point in the next few months. So we'll get to talk about them again. But Muti is the person to go for if you want one set alone, if you can still find it separately, or, you get the Muti box, or you can find it somehow. One box not to get, and that, I don't even think it's still available, was this monstrosity. This is Scriabin, The Complete Works, which I was really excited about when it came out because, I mean, how many complete works are there? This was it, right? But instead of taking the best performances from Universal and putting them together, do all of Ashkenazis and Richters and, so many great pianists have done Scriabin. They just did this hodgepodge of different pianists and different, even the symphonies are terrible. They have one Ashkenazi. The rest of them, they have an Inbal. They've got Gergiev. It's just atrocious what they did with this. It was like a random grab bag of stuff. And yes, it's complete, but who cares? It's really, really a letdown. And so I would avoid this at all costs and just go find things separately. You're much, much better off artistically. And with that, we come to the end of this little disquisition on the art of Alexander Scriabin. Such an interesting composer. Really an interesting composer. A fascinating personality in music. One who is so impossible to pigeonhole that he gets overlooked. He got overlooked by me for a year. If it weren't for you, I probably wouldn't have done this talk so early on. So thank you for suggesting him. Thank you for listening. Keep on listening. And here we go. It's another year. Take care.